Welcome to Unleashed, your go-to channel for in-depth, up-to-the-minute analysis of global conflicts and diplomacy. In today's episode, we dive into two of the world's most pressing stories: the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, where relentless drone and missile attacks continue to reshape the battlefield and test the resilience of a nation fighting for survival, and the tense standoff over Iran's nuclear program, where strikes, sanctions, and fragile negotiations keep the world on edge. Join us as we unpack the latest developments, explore the complex politics behind these crises, and reveal what they mean for the future of international security. Stay tuned because this is Unleashed. Zelenskyy condemns Russia for launching a brutal attack on humanity after the latest drone onslaught. And Germany vows to expedite delivery of Patriot systems as drone strikes Kyiv metro station sheltering civilians. As dawn broke over a battered Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky's voice carried the weight of a nation under siege. The night had been filled with fire and fear. A relentless barrage of Russian drones and missiles rained down on cities, shattering homes, tearing through schools, and leaving families huddled in cold shelters. Standing before the world, Zelenskyy called the attack what it felt like to every Ukrainian hiding beneath the sirens: an assault on humanity. It was not just an attack on buildings or defenses, but on life itself, on children, the elderly, on hope. Yet, amid the smoke and rubble, there was a glimmer of resistance and solidarity. Germany stepped forward, pledging 5 powerful Patriot air defense systems, weapons that could shield Kyiv's sky and give its defenders a fighting chance. For Ukraine, this was not merely about missiles or machinery. It was a story of survival, of a people refusing to bow, even as the storm of war raged around them. The night sky over Ukraine turned into a battlefield as hundreds of dark, buzzing shadows, more than 420 drones, cut through the silence, followed by the deadly roar of over 20 missiles. It was a night meant for sleep, but instead, families found themselves huddled in fear, deep inside the metro stations of Kyiv, turning underground tunnels into makeshift sanctuaries. When dawn arrived, the echoes of explosions had left behind more than shattered windows. 2 lives were lost, and countless others were marked by terror. The attack wasn't just a strike on infrastructure. It was a calculated assault on the very places where people sought safety. President Zelenskyy, with a voice both weary and resolute, recounted the horror. Moscow had unleashed one of its heaviest overnight assaults yet, turning the capital's heart into a reminder that no corner of Ukraine was truly beyond reach. In a room filled with the weight of war and the urgency of time, Germany's defense minister, Boris Pistorius, stood before allies with a promise that carried both hope and haste. Berlin, he declared, was ready to pay the United States whatever it took to ensure the fastest possible delivery of 5 Patriot air defense systems, weapons that could mean the difference between life and death for Ukraine's cities. The commitment came with sacrifice. Germany would part with 2 Patriots from its own arsenal of 9, sending them to Ukraine without delay, even as plans to buy replacements from the US were hastily set in motion. The details of the other 3 systems were still to be ironed out, but the intent was clear. Ukraine's skies needed protection now, not tomorrow. The announcement followed a tense gathering of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, a coalition of 50 Western allies united in their support for Kyiv. There, Britain stepped forward too, pledging £700 million for air defense and artillery ammunition this year, strengthening Ukraine's ability to withstand the relentless storms of missiles and drones. It was more than policy or politics. It was a message to the world: Ukraine would not stand alone. In the shadow of relentless attacks on Ukraine's cities, Germany's defense minister, Boris Pistorius, spoke with a determination that cut through the uncertainty of war. After intense talks with his US counterpart, Pete Hegseth, he revealed an urgent pact. Germany will contribute to providing the 5 urgently needed Patriot systems as quickly as possible, Pistorius vowed. The words carried the weight of both urgency and solidarity. But speed in wartime logistics is never simple. How we can achieve that, he continued, is something we will coordinate closely, and in a spirit of mutual trust among partners within the next few days. It was a promise forged not just in strategy rooms, but in the shared understanding that every day of delay meant more skies unprotected, more lives at risk. The coming days would be a race, one that Germany and its allies intended to win. The war in Ukraine has entered a new and more dangerous chapter. In recent months, the Kremlin has turned the night sky into a weapon, launching wave after wave of drones in a relentless aerial campaign. What once came in dozens now arrives in hundreds, dark swarms buzzing like angry wasps, overwhelming the defenders below. Data from Ukraine's Air Force, shared first with the Financial Times, paints a grim picture. Russia's swarm tactics are working. Between April and June, nearly 15% of these drones found their targets, triple the success rate of just months earlier. Each strike tells the story of air defenses stretched thin, of Kyiv's desperate need for stronger shields to guard its cities. Earlier this month, Moscow launched a staggering 728 drones in a single offensive, a record-breaking onslaught. Yet experts warn that this may only be the beginning. The Institute for the Study of War predicts that future attacks could see 1,000 or even 2,000 drones unleashed in a single night by November. For Ukraine, the message is chilling. The sky itself has become a battlefield, and the race to build stronger defenses has never been more urgent. On Monday night, as sirens wailed above Kyiv, hundreds of people huddled in the dimly lit tunnels of Lukyanivska metro station, seeking refuge from the storm of drones overhead. Families clutched each other, children curled into their parents' arms, and the cold concrete walls became their only shield. Then came the blast. A drone exploded just outside the station, shaking the ground like an earthquake. Smoke poured into the entrance, curling through the stairways and creeping down into the platform below. Video footage later revealed the haunting scene. Figures standing still in a haze of dust, faces pale and eyes wide. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman's sobs cut through the silence, raw and trembling, as if echoing the fear that gripped them all. Lukyanivska was not alone in its suffering. 3 other districts of the capital were bombarded that night, each one enduring its own moment of terror as Russia's relentless assault tore through the city's heart. The aftermath of the strike left Lukyanivska metro station scarred and trembling with memories of the night before. The station's entrance was damaged as a result of the attack, reported Timur Tkachenko, the head of Kyiv's military administration. His voice carried the weight of devastation as he listed the casualties of the blast. Not just the station, but the shops, businesses, and even a kindergarten that had been struck, each a silent witness to the violence. Among those who lived through the chaos was Max, a 32-year-old resident. His friend had run for cover underground, diving into the station's depths as the attack unfolded. "He called me during the night," Max recalled, his words heavy with disbelief. "He said he heard the strike. Part of the building and even the roof tumbled down the escalator. There was smoke billowing on the platform." The image was almost surreal. A place meant for movement and safety turned into a choking, dust-filled cavern, a shelter trembling under the weight of war. As night falls in Kyiv, Lukyanivska metro station becomes a symbol of both refuge and despair. For those who have sheltered there, the fear is palpable. "If you walk around here, it's like hell on earth," a resident murmured, eyes scanning the shattered glass and twisted metal. "During the day, it's okay. When the night starts, it's always really hard. This is at least the 5th time Lukyanivska has been bombarded. Windows are blown out. If smoke can now reach underground, where do we hide?" The question lingered like the acrid scent of smoke that still clung to the air. The underground, once a safe haven, no longer felt untouchable. That same day, France's Foreign Minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, arrived in Kyiv, walking through the damaged station alongside President Zelenskyy. His face reflected the shock and gravity of what he saw. "Shelters themselves are no longer entirely safe," he said, standing before the battered entrance. "The metro station next to me, which serves as a shelter for Kyiv residents, became a target of the attack." It was a chilling reminder. Even the places meant to protect the innocent were now on the front lines of this war. In the midst of the relentless assault on Kyiv, French embassy staff found themselves plunged into the heart of danger, forced to hide for 2 long hours as the city shook under a barrage of drones and missiles. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, reflecting on the harrowing experience, spoke with urgency and resolve. He called for increased pressure on Russia, emphasizing that the world must not relent. To back his words, France pledged to allocate an additional €200 million, £170 million, next year to bolster Ukraine's critical infrastructure and fragile economy, lifelines in the shadow of war. The terror didn't end there. Just after 2 a.m., a sinister swarm of drones buzzed overhead, their ominous hum cutting through the silence of the night. Explosions and thunderous booms echoed across the city as Ukrainian air defense batteries fired relentlessly, trying to intercept the onslaught. For nearly 3 hours, the skies were a battlefield, until finally, the raid came to a tense and uneasy close, leaving behind smoke, shattered nerves, and a city once again braced for what might come next. Far from the front lines, in the western city of Ivano-Frankivsk, the echoes of war struck with a sudden and brutal force. Hundreds of miles from the fiercest fighting, the city faced its heaviest attack since Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion began in 2022. Mayor Ruslan Marcinkiv described the night as one of unprecedented devastation. Explosions rocked the city and nearby villages, leaving several people wounded and communities shaken to their core. Meanwhile, the industrial heart of Ukraine, Kyiv, the nation's second-largest city, also bore the scars of explosions, reminding everyone that the war's reach was vast and unrelenting. Amid the chaos, there was a flicker of cautious hope. In his daily address, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced that new peace talks were set to take place this week. Speaking with measured optimism, he shared, "Today, I discussed with Defense Minister Rustem Umerov the preparations for the exchange and another meeting in Turkey with the Russian side." Umerov reported that the meeting is scheduled for Wednesday. More details will be available tomorrow. Though 2 previous rounds of talks in Istanbul had failed to break the deadlock on a ceasefire, they had brought moments of humanity amid the conflict, large-scale prisoner exchanges and agreements to return the bodies of fallen soldiers. Now, as the world watched and waited, Ukraine and Russia prepared to meet once more, each hoping this time the talks would bring a step closer to peace. This month, amid mounting international pressure, the Kremlin signaled a willingness to continue negotiations with Ukraine, following an ultimatum from former U.S. President Donald Trump, who gave Russia 50 days to strike a peace deal or face new sanctions. Yet, beneath this diplomatic overture, there was little sign that President Vladimir Putin had softened his stance. On Sunday, Dmitry Peskov, the Russian president's spokesperson, spoke candidly about the challenges ahead. He described the path to a deal as not simple, underscoring Moscow's firm objectives. These goals were clear and uncompromising: to seize more Ukrainian territory and to replace Zelenskyy and his pro-Western government. Meanwhile, in response to Russia's ongoing aggression, the European Union took decisive action. On Friday, it unveiled its 18th package of sanctions, targeting Russian banks and slashing the price cap on oil exports. The aim was clear: to choke off the Kremlin's ability to fund its relentless war machine. In the shadow of these moves, the delicate dance of diplomacy and conflict continued, with the world watching closely as Ukraine and Russia stood at a precarious crossroads. Today, Tuesday, July 22nd, the war in Ukraine continues to unfold with relentless intensity and fragile hope. The dawn broke over a city still reeling from last night's devastating drone and missile barrage, where Kyiv's skies were pierced by hundreds of incoming threats, leaving behind shattered buildings, wounded civilians, and the haunting question of where safety can now be found. In the west, the city of Ivano-Frankivsk counted the scars of its heaviest attack since the war began, while explosions echoed again in Kyiv, reminding all that no corner of Ukraine is beyond the reach of conflict. Yet amid the destruction, diplomacy stirs. President Zelenskyy announced preparations for a new round of peace talks in Istanbul this Wednesday, signaling a cautious step toward dialogue despite the hard realities on the ground. Across the Atlantic and Europe, allies moved swiftly to reinforce Ukraine's defenses. Germany committed to delivering 5 Patriot air defense systems as quickly as possible, pledging to coordinate closely with the United States to speed their arrival. Britain and France also announced fresh aid packages, underscoring the international community's resolve to support Ukraine's fight. But the Kremlin remains steadfast, with its spokesperson reiterating Moscow's unyielding demands and the European Union tightening sanctions in an effort to curb Russia's war funding. Today stands as a day of contrasts. A city sheltering from missiles and smoke, leaders seeking peace amid the roar of warplanes, and a world watching as Ukraine's struggle for survival presses on. In the early hours over Kyiv, the night sky erupted in a deadly storm as a massive wave of Russian drones and missiles descended upon the city. The attack left deep scars, not just on buildings, but on lives. By morning, the toll became heartbreakingly clear. 2 people had lost their lives, and 15 others were wounded, including a 12-year-old child caught in the chaos. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy spoke somberly of the tragedy, his words a stark reminder that behind every explosion lay families shattered, and a city fighting to hold on amidst the relentless violence. Under the cover of darkness, Kyiv endured one of the fiercest aerial assaults it had seen in months. The city trembled as 426 Russian drones and 24 missiles streaked through the sky, aiming to sow destruction and fear. The damage was widespread and devastating. A drone struck the entrance to a subway station in Kyiv's Shevchenkivsky district, a place where countless residents had sought refuge from the bombs. The blast shattered the sense of safety, turning a shelter into a site of danger. Farther northeast, in Ukraine's Sumy region, the violence continued. A drone attack there left 11 people injured, including a 5-year-old boy, Governor Ola Hryhorov revealed on Telegram, underscoring the far-reaching human cost of the conflict. Yet, Ukraine's air defenses fought back fiercely. The Air Force reported it had downed or jammed 224 of the incoming drones and missiles, an extraordinary effort to shield its people. Still, the fate of another 203 drones vanished into the night, disappearing from radar, silent threats that slipped past the defenses, leaving an unsettling uncertainty. That night, the skies over Ukraine told a story of relentless assault and fierce resistance, an ongoing battle where every moment counted, and every life hung in the balance. On the other side of the front line, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported its own victories in the night's deadly exchange, claiming that Russian air defense systems had successfully downed 132 Ukrainian drones on Monday, signaling Moscow's determination to push back against Kyiv's aerial efforts. In the Russian-occupied Zaporizhia region, the toll of war edged closer to civilian life. Governor Yevgeny Balitsky recounted a tense episode in the port city of Berdyansk, where fragments from downed Ukrainian drones rained down onto a kindergarten and a fire station. Miraculously, no casualties were reported, but the incident underscored how deeply the conflict had pierced everyday places, turning even centers of care and safety into scenes marked by danger. The war's reach was starkly visible, touching not only soldiers and battlefields, but the fragile rhythms of civilian life caught in the crossfire. In the corridors of power across Europe, a surge of determination was building to bolster Ukraine's faltering defenses. In Berlin, Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store stood alongside German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, announcing that Norway was ready to help fund the deployment of U.S. Patriot missile systems, crucial shields against the relentless drone and missile attacks. Not far away, in the Netherlands, the air was filled with similar resolve. The Dutch newspaper De Telegraaf reported that the country's Minister of Defense, Ruben Brekelmans, pledged a substantial contribution to the delivery of Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine, another vital layer of protection for Kyiv's skies. Meanwhile, hope flickered on a different front. President Zelenskyy took to social media, praising French companies for their decision to begin manufacturing drones inside Ukraine, a bold step that would strengthen Ukraine's ability to defend itself from within. But the fight was far from over. Ukrainian Minister of Defense Denis Shmyhal addressed Western allies in an urgent online meeting, laying bare the stark reality. Ukraine needed $6 billion to close this year's defense procurement gap. In response, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, a coalition of high-level military donors led by the United Kingdom's Defense Secretary John Healey and Germany's Boris Pistorius, gathered to coordinate their efforts. Among those present were U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and NATO leader Mark Rutte, all united in the shared mission to keep Ukraine standing. This was more than aid, it was a lifeline, a testament to the global will to support a nation fighting not just for its own survival, but for the future of democracy itself. As the war's relentless thunder rolled on, the fragile threads of diplomacy stretched taut with cautious hope and simmering tension. In his daily address, President Zelenskyy announced that new peace talks between Russia and Ukraine were scheduled for Wednesday in Turkey, promising that more details would emerge on Tuesday. The world held its breath, aware that behind every diplomatic gesture lay the hopes of millions longing for an end to the bloodshed. Yet the path to peace remained uncertain. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, speaking on Monday, warned that a lot of diplomatic work lies ahead, signaling that Moscow's demands and Kyiv's resolve still stood far apart in the search for a breakthrough. In a surprise show of solidarity, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot made an unannounced visit to Kyiv, underscoring France's unwavering support for Ukraine amid the turmoil. Meanwhile, shadows of espionage and distrust crept closer to home. Ukraine's security services detained an official from its own National Anti-Corruption Bureau, accusing them of spying for Russia, a stark reminder of the war's complexities that extended beyond battlefields. And in a cultural echo of the conflict, Italy's royal palace of Caserta canceled a concert by Russian conductor Valery Gergiev, known for his vocal support of President Putin. The decision came after an outcry from Ukraine and its supporters, reflecting how the war's ripples reached even the world of music and art. On this day, the dance of politics and diplomacy continued, a delicate balance between the hope for peace and the realities of war. In the ever-escalating conflict in Gaza, tragedy struck anew as an Israeli military operation claimed the lives of 60 people, deepening the anguish of a region already ravaged by violence and hardship. Amidst the rubble and despair, Hamas announced it was working toward a truce, a desperate bid to stop famine gripping the population, a plea for a pause in the bloodshed to allow for food and aid to reach those trapped in the conflict's grip. This fragile hope for relief comes amid a landscape scarred by suffering, where every ceasefire is both a breath held and a fragile promise in the storm of war. On Monday, the conflict in Gaza reached yet another harrowing chapter. Israeli forces advanced into the southern and eastern districts of Deir el-Balah for the first time, with tanks rolling through neighborhoods already scarred by war. In the midst of these attacks, more than 60 Palestinians lost their lives, including 11 aid workers desperately trying to bring relief to those in need. Amid the devastation, Hamas announced it was working tirelessly, engaging mediators day and night in a desperate bid to stop famine and end what it called this criminal war. Their plea echoed through the ruins of a city where everyday survival felt increasingly impossible. The situation in Gaza's hospitals was growing dire. Philippe Lazzarini, chief of the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, painted a grim picture. Doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers were fainting due to hunger and exhaustion, stretched beyond their limits as they struggled to care for the wounded. Voices of the international community rose in unison. Foreign ministers from 25 countries, alongside the European Union Commissioner, issued a call for an immediate end to the war, warning that the suffering in Gaza had reached new depths. The human toll was staggering. Since the start of the conflict, Israel's war on Gaza had claimed the lives of at least 59,029 people and wounded over 142,000, while Israel mourned 1,139 killed in the October 7, 2023 attacks, with more than 200 taken captive. In this ongoing tragedy, hope hung by a thread, a fragile desire for peace amid a landscape marked by loss and resilience. In a bold declaration that stirred both concern and cautious optimism, Iran's foreign minister announced that the country's nuclear enrichment efforts would continue unabated, signaling Tehran's firm stance on advancing its nuclear program. Yet, alongside this steadfast commitment, there was a glimmer of diplomacy. The minister expressed that Iran remained open to talks, leaving a door ajar for dialogue and negotiation amid rising tensions. This delicate balance between firm resolve and willingness to engage reflects the complex dance of diplomacy, a story still unfolding, with the world watching closely for what the next chapter might hold. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says continuing enrichment is a matter of national pride after U.S. and Israeli attacks caused serious damage. In the aftermath of recent airstrikes that severely damaged Iran's nuclear facilities, Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs Abbas Araghchi spoke with unwavering resolve. During an interview aired on Monday with U.S. broadcaster Fox News, Araghchi acknowledged the serious and severe damage inflicted on Tehran's uranium enrichment program by waves of U.S. and Israeli attacks last month. Yet, despite the setbacks, he made it clear that Iran cannot and will not give up its enrichment efforts. It is now stopped because, yes, damages are serious and severe, Araghchi explained, but obviously we cannot give up our enrichment because it is an achievement of our own scientists, and now, more than that, it is a question of national pride. His words carried the weight of a nation determined to defend its scientific progress and sovereignty, even amid growing international pressure and conflict. The story of Iran's nuclear ambitions continues, marked by resilience, defiance, and the enduring struggle between damage and determination. In a rare and carefully measured interview, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi opened a window into Tehran's complex stance toward the United States. While making it clear that direct talks with Washington would not happen for the time being, Araghchi expressed a cautious openness to dialogue. If they, the U.S., are coming for a win-win solution, I am ready to engage with them, he said, extending a tentative hand across a diplomatic chasm. He went further, offering a path forward built on trust and transparency. Iran, Araghchi insisted, was willing to take any confidence-building measure needed to prove that Iran's nuclear program is peaceful and would remain peaceful forever. The country's commitment, he emphasized, was firm. Iran would never pursue nuclear weapons. In return, he said, Tehran expected the lifting of sanctions, a step necessary to break the deadlock and ease the economic strain on the nation. So, my message to the United States is that let's go for a negotiated solution for Iran's nuclear program, Araghchi urged, underscoring that this was not an impossible dream. His remarks, part of a 16-minute interview aired on Fox News, a channel closely watched by then U.S. President Donald Trump, carried historical weight. There is a negotiated solution for our nuclear program. We have done it once in the past. We are ready to do it once again, he said, hinting at the delicate dance of diplomacy that might yet bring both sides back to the table. In those words lay a story of cautious hope, resilience, and the enduring search for common ground amid deep mistrust. Earlier this year, Tehran and Washington quietly resumed talks over Iran's nuclear program, a delicate step toward mending a fractured relationship. These discussions came 7 years after then-President Donald Trump's dramatic decision to pull the United States out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, a landmark agreement signed in 2015 by Iran and several world powers. Under the JCPOA, Iran had agreed to open its nuclear sites to comprehensive international inspections, offering transparency in exchange for the lifting of crippling economic sanctions. But Trump's withdrawal unraveled this fragile balance, reigniting tensions and casting a long shadow over diplomatic efforts. Now, those recent talks hinted at a cautious revival of dialogue, a story of two nations tentatively seeking a way back from the brink, hoping to find a path that could restore trust and ease a crisis that has shaped the course of global politics for nearly a decade. The unraveling of a fragile peace began with a stark accusation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly charged Iran with pursuing a secret nuclear program, casting suspicion and deepening fears on the global stage. In response, Iran steadfastly insisted that its nuclear enrichment efforts were purely for civilian purposes, a claim it has maintained for years amid growing international scrutiny. Despite this tension, the United States and Iran continued to engage in talks as recently as May, hopeful that a new deal could be forged to replace the collapsed JCPOA. But those negotiations were shattered in June. On June 13th, Israel launched a series of surprise bombing raids across Iran, targeting military and nuclear sites. The strikes sent shockwaves through the region and marked a dangerous escalation. The human cost was heavy. More than 900 people lost their lives in Iran, while at least 28 were killed in Israel before a fragile ceasefire was finally established on June 24th. This sequence of events revealed a story of mistrust, conflict, and missed chances. A tale of how fragile diplomacy can be shattered by sudden violence, leaving the world to grapple with the consequences. In the shadow of escalating tensions, the United States joined Israel in striking Iranian nuclear facilities, with the Pentagon later claiming these attacks had set back Iran's nuclear program by 1 to 2 years, a significant blow to Tehran's ambitions. Yet, despite the damage, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi revealed on Monday that Iran's Atomic Energy Organization was still assessing the full impact on its enriched materials. He promised that Tehran would soon inform the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, of its findings, signaling a cautious step toward transparency. Araghchi emphasized that any request for IAEA inspectors to return would be carefully considered, underscoring Iran's measured approach amid mounting distrust. He insisted, "We have not stopped our cooperation with the agency, even as tensions simmered beneath the surface." In reality, IAEA inspectors had already left Iran after President Masoud Pezeshkian signed a law earlier this month suspending cooperation with the agency, a move that sent ripples through the international community. Tehran's ire was especially directed at the IAEA and its chief, Rafael Grossi, following a June 12th resolution by the IAEA board accusing Iran of failing to meet its nuclear obligations. Iranian officials dismissed the resolution as one of the excuses Israel used to justify its 12-day bombing campaign starting June 13th. Meanwhile, the world watched with cautious hope. United Nations spokesperson Stefan Dujarric welcomed renewed dialogue between European powers and Iran, pointing to upcoming talks scheduled in Turkey between Iran, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. The 3 European signatories to the original JCPOA made clear that if Tehran refused to resume negotiations, international sanctions could be swiftly reimposed. A stark reminder that the path ahead remained fraught with tension, but not yet closed to diplomacy. In this unfolding story, diplomacy and defiance stood locked in a precarious balance, with the fate of a nuclear deal and regional stability hanging in the balance.